Go hanging.
Anybody else? Okay.
Just committee, yeah. What do you mean, just committee? Don't.
Good morning, everybody. I'm glad we could all get together. You know, driving up here, I realized you guys don't know if I shaved this morning or showered when I got out of the barn, but I don't know if you're wearing pajamas either, so. Can we have a motion to accept the minutes from the previous meeting? John?
Move.
First, Paul, second. Oh, and all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Okay, did you want to do a roll call?
We'll do a quick roll call.
Deb wants to do a quick roll call of the committee to make sure we have a quorum.
Mr. Rozell?
Good.
Here. Mr. Campbell?
Here.
Mr. Hicks?
Here.
Mr. Happ?
Here.
Mrs. Fedler?
I'm here.
Mr. Shaw?
Here.
Mr. Ferguson?
I'm here.
And Mr. Wilson? Okay, you've got a quorum.
Okay, very good. Joe, you're on, aren't you? Joe Brilliant? We had you a few minutes ago, Joe. You on? Joe, you got unmute if you're muted. What do you suggest, Tim? Okay. All right. Hopefully we'll get Joe back again, so we'll jump right down to Deb. She gets the hot seat.
Alrighty. So am I on with audio or?
There we go.
Hello, virtual people.
So, the first thing we have on the list today is County Route 46. We need to award the construction to Evolution Construction Services because they were the low bid.
Do we have a motion for that?
I make a motion.
So moved.
Seconded.
I have a motion and second. All in favor? Aye?
Discussion.
Okay, you want discussion? We'll ask, yep.
Hartford has a
Dave.
question.
Go ahead.
Where are they located and what was the cost?
They are out of Clifton Park, and the cost, the low bid was $485,238.88.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? All right, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Hey, Deb.
So the next we have to do a budget amendment for aluminum and galvanized sign posts and sign blanks. They were ordered last year, but we got the bill this year.
So is this just moving money forward, is that,
Yep.
Chris?
How much is it for, Deb?
One is for $1,508, that's the sign blanks, and the other is for $10,602 for the delineators and posts.
So moved.
Okay, is there we have a motion? Second?
Seconded.
Second? Any discussion?
Hartford.
Dana?
Deb, $10,000 for a post, and I think you said the reflectors that go on the post. How much is a post?
Yep.
That's a lot of money for a post.
It depends on how long it is. So if it's an 8'2" galvanized post, it's $15.92. But we send these things out for bids, so it's the low bid.
Okay, so say the big one is $20 a post. $10,000, that's a lot of posts.
Yep, we got 200 of them. Well, we got 200 of a certain size, 300 of another size.
How long? That's more than one. That's more than 1 year supply, obviously. Or do you get like 3 years supply when you order?
No, we only, I believe we only order 1 year post. We send it out for bid every year.
I think he's asked, do we replace that many every year?
900.
500?
Well, we've got 200 at 8'2", 200 at 4'3", 100 at 10'2". I'll ask Matt, but I mean, we don't have a stash of posts anywhere, so.
Mr. Shaw.
Yeah, that sounds about right, because those short ones are reflector posts, and they're by the guardrails, they get cleaned off all the time. That sounds normal.
Any more discussion?
I have a question.
Yep. Go ahead, Jeff.
We order the same amount every year, or does it vary?
Is it about the same amount every year, Deb?
I don't know. I'll have to ask Matt. I mean, he's the one who's in charge of it, and he does a great job at it, so I don't get down into exactly how many he orders every year, but if you want me to, I will.
No, I
No
just
big
think they're
deal.
wondering if they were getting broke off or.
No, I don't mind doing it. I just, it's, you know, I mean, he does a good job at what he does, so I don't try to understand every little nuance of what he does.
Any other discussion?
I don't think asking if this is I don't think asking if this is a 1 year supply is a nuance, a minutia. I think it's kind of a valid question.
And I said I would do it if you want me to. I have never done it in the past. Ask him if that's a 1 year supply. I know he orders off the low bid every year, and I know that I've been down where he keeps his stockpile, and I don't see any plethora of posts down there, so.
Okay.
That's my assumption, that it's 1 year supply.
Okay, we've got a motion, a second, and I think we're done with discussion. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? The Max Force engines. The rest of the committee got this stuff too, right?
So I sent out the analysis of the Max Force engines and everything that we got in the mail for it, and had you guys look at it. There's basically two ways we can go with this. We can get $2,500 for each truck. There's 5 trucks. Or we can get $10,000 for each truck towards the cost of buying a new truck. That would be a rebate. We send out to bid, and for the 2 years that I've been here, this bid has been won by the Navistar trucks. So the more money option of the $10,000 selection is that, but the guaranteed option is the $2,500. So it's basically $50,000 versus $12,500. There is a nuance with the rebate vouchers in that you have to order them within 18 months of, I'll find that here. So, it says that the rebates will expire 18 months after the date that the rebate certificates are sent to qualifying class members. So we would buy 5 trucks within 18 months.
It's probably going to be within 18 months of several months to get the certificates out.
So it would be next year and likely
part of the
part of the year after. So this should work for us, the way it looks,
If they're the low bidder, right?
if they're a little bidder.
Right.
Yep.
Yes,
What's the committee saying, Mr. Wilson?
So, thank you. Deb, appreciate that, read ahead. So, what's the useful life of this truck? I noticed that it's a 2014, is the latest bracket in that timeline. So you add 18 months to whenever we might get this paperwork, you're talking about a 10-year-old truck, correct?
Yes.
And what do we get out of that? We get about what, 10 to 14 years out of a truck if we're lucky?
Well, we are on a 7-year cycle, and we still have these trucks. I don't know if it matters if we sell these trucks before then.
I guess,
I think
I guess
Ty is
my,
on here.
yeah, I guess what I was thinking is there's better value out of going after the option of the rebate voucher, since we're gonna have to replace these trucks anyway.
Yeah, we think that the rebate option is the most fiscally responsible one.
Mr. Chairman.
You can also buy off the, I think it's NJPA. NJPA. You can buy off that, and we do get a little bit better price when we go out to bid, but you could, if you wanted to use the 10,000, that's an option as well.
Mr. DeBolt?
Yeah, so, Chairman, I think for the committee's discussion, if you look at just the dollars, getting the $10,000 rebate per 5 qualifying Max Force trucks is the best monetary option for the county. That is contingent upon our basically commitment to buy 5 new replacement heavy-duty dump trucks in the next, let's call it 24 months, figuring that there's a 4 or 5 month lag until we get the rebate certificates. That would be well within our current equipment replacement plan, so it would not require us to buy any more trucks than we were looking at. And to the point of it only being applicable if the Navistars are the low bid, we have a couple options. As the superintendent mentioned, we could purchase through a different purchasing vehicle than bid that would allow us to go directly to the Navistar. Or this would be an instance where we could, because of the existence of the rebate, we could consider passing a standardizing resolution which says that for the next X number of years, we are only going to purchase Navistar trucks for the following reasons. Standardization of replacement parts, ease of maintenance, et cetera, et cetera. And then when we bid it next year, we could bid Navistar, and then you've got the manufacturer is already determined, and you're just looking at the dealers essentially as being the bidding entity. So there are a couple of options there if the board decides to go forward with the rebate option.
Okay, the committee has heard the opinion of DPW and the administrator. What's your pleasure? Is there a motion? Brian?
Yeah, well, I was even going to take it another way, Jay. Also, if you take the rebate option, if you buy one truck, you're $10,000 compared to $12,500 the other option. So even if you just were worried about the money, if you bought 2, you're ahead on the rebates. I mean, we're good there. And the other thing is, since it is the normal realm of business that we would buy that many trucks, I think it's kind of a no-brainer in that sense. And I really think that I would still put them, I guess I would bid them both ways. I would bid amongst all the different types of vehicles, and you could also bid just to have, you could put out 2 separate bids if you wanted to find out if another company was lower or who was the lowest of the Navistar people. But yeah, I think getting the 10,000 is easily the best answer on this one.
So are you making a motion for that option?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll
A
second that.
second.
Okay, we got a second. Cassie, is there any more discussion? Matt?
Yeah, so I'm gonna be the, on the other side, I guess, this one time. Chris, we put these out for bid every year. We don't piggyback off anybody else. We do our own bids.
We
Yes?
do our own bids.
Okay. It's just
Yes.
a little bit of counterintuitive to say they gave us a better deal because they screwed us the first time. We bought something that didn't work very well, and they're trying to make up for it. And so we're locking ourselves in to buying from the same company that didn't do a very good job the first time. I'm only saying that because the town of Granville submitted, we have 3 of them. We submitted ours about 3 months ago, and we went for the cash option because we wanted to have flexibility going forward on what kind of trucks we buy. I think it does buttonhole us into having to go with this, with that sort of that incentive out there to say, well, let's go around all what we normally would do because that $10,000 rebate is hanging out there. I guess as long as we leave the flexibility that we don't have to go with these Navistar trucks, if we can bid everything so we can really grind when we get all the numbers back in to make a better decision, I guess I could go along with that, but I just hate to tie us up with that incentive. I guess just an opinion.
Thanks, Matt. Anybody else have any discussion? John?
I mean, I agree with Matt. If we can go ahead with this without any, with still the option to bid other trucks, we may get other trucks cheaper than $10,000 a truck cheaper.
It hasn't been my experience since I've been here that anyone other than this one has won our bid. So we would still send it out to bid. And if it was less than that, then we would make that decision then.
Mr. Shaw?
Yeah, this question's for either Roger or Chris. When you bid these and the low bidder comes back, do you use the rebate to determine low bidder, or is the rebate applied after the determination of low bidder?
This rebate in particular?
Yeah,
Yeah, that'll be applied after the low bidder.
so they have to win low bid for the
Right,
rebate to apply?
right.
Okay.
Any other questions?
But they're not offering it to you, it's something you already hold in your hand.
Matt, did I see you?
Yeah, I only ask because I don't know. We make sure that we're putting these bids out wide enough so we're going to cast a bigger net so we may get other bidders, or are we writing these specs so narrowly that it only has to come down to the Navistar? I just hope going forward we make it wide enough so that we will have competition and other bidders. That's all. Because if Deb's telling me ever since she's been there, oh, it's just Navistar. Well, that makes me concerned that whatever we're putting in the bid specs might be a little bit too tight. That's all.
Deb, I see Ty is on. Do you want him to answer that?
Yeah, he can. I mean, we
Ty, can you unmute and answer that?
we sent the bid specs out to the supervisors last year to be reviewed as well.
Yes, it is.
Is Ty on here?
You on, Ty? I think you're there. You're unmuted, Ty. Go ahead. Well, not getting them. Go ahead, Deb. You.
Well, like I was saying, we sent the bid specs out because there was speculation that we were doing that before, and we didn't get any comments back on that because that's not our intention. So I don't believe that is what we're trying to do at the DPW.
Deb, have we gotten other truck manufacturers bidding, and Navistar's been the lowest, or is only Navistar bid? No,
there's another truck manufacturer. And Ty can answer this better than I can, but I believe that there's certain areas you can't get, I don't think you can get a bid from a Syracuse Navistar dealer. I think you have to.
That may be the case. I don't know that off
I'm
the
pretty
top of
sure
my head.
that's true.
I know that I'll use a different manufacturer for John Deere. They do geographical franchises, and so we can only get bids from Nortrax for John Deere equipment. I would not be surprised if Navistar is the same way. I don't happen to know that one off the top of my head, but that's not uncommon.
Okay, any other questions? All right, we have a motion to go with the rebate program on trucks that are purchased in the next 18, well, basically 24 months by the time the paperwork gets done. All those in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
Who did we have the nay on?
Mr.
Matt?
Hicks.
Okay, okay.
Take the cash.
All right, Deb, next.
So next, we were going to look into piggybacking for painting so that we could get started painting. But it ends up costing $275 more than our bid that just expired. Out of almost 41,000 that we spent on painting last year, that's not very much, but we decided against this, so we're gonna scratch that because we don't wanna spend any extra money. Unless everybody wants their roads painted right now. Okay. So, last year, most of you may remember that we have what's called a Highway Worker 3. So there's 3 different types of highway workers in our buildings. There's 1, 2, and 3. And they each have specific responsibilities and duties and qualifications for that. The Highway Worker 3s are the ones who tend to run the machines, the grade all, the track hoe, and stuff like that. So we have a certain number of permanent Highway Worker 3s, which we utilize. And then especially in the summer, but it also happens year-round, we have as-needed Highway Worker 3s. So when we need a Highway Worker 3, we will go by seniority and have that person operate a machine. What I noticed when we came here was that it's sometimes difficult to move our workers around efficiently because of the seniority clauses in the contract with the Highway Worker 3. So we put forth last year to pay all of the eligible Highway Worker 3s. It was 9 last year for 26 weeks, and it worked out very well for us. This year we have 7 who are eligible, and we would like to go forward with that. The cost to pay all 7 Highway Worker 3s for the summer is in our budget, and it amounts to $6,333.60. Of that amount, we are using as-needed Highway Worker 3s already, so it would actually be less than that. So, any questions on how we do that?
Is there any
So
discussion?
this is actually
We did
a
it last year.
reduction, Deb, from last year?
Yes, we've had, let's see, we had somebody left the shop, and one of our Highway Worker 3s qualified to go over there, so that reduced it by 1. And another person left the payroll, so we were at 9 and now we're at 7. Not all 7 are necessarily going to elect to do this, but that's the most that are eligible.
Okay.
Any other questions? Could I have a motion then to do it?
I make the
Go ahead,
motion to
Paul.
move forward. I make the motion to move forward and pay the guys. It's a time saver and a money saver all in the long run.
Okay, I have a motion. Is there a second?
I second it.
Kathy seconded. Okay, any more discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
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 Opposed? All right.
So before we go to carpool, I just wanted to say that I sent the mowing contracts out to the supervisors who mow for the DPW. So if you typically mow for us and didn't get one, I know I had Dana's email wrong, but I don't think do we mow for you, Dana, or do you mow for us, Dana?
Absolutely. Yes.
Did you get the contract? Because I'll send it out to you. You may not have gotten it with the old email address.
Somehow I did get it. I don't think you used that same email address you sent out the return to work, but I did get it.
Okay. So the mowing contracts are out there. We emailed them on May 1st. For the Board of Supervisors meeting, before the Board of Supervisors meeting, we will have the MS4 annual report ready and the DPW annual report ready, and we'll send that out to everybody for review. Next, we wanted to talk about carpool. Is Al doing something on carpool?
Al is gonna do a PowerPoint. Are you on, Al? He's not on, huh? Okay. Well, we're waiting to try to get a hold of Al. Deb, did you want to touch on a little story about our heavy equipment trailer?
So last year, we ordered a lowboy because ours was in very need of being replaced. And it went out to bid, and long story short, I can't remember the name of who got it. It begins with an H, but they promised it to us in Holden, and they promised it to us in the mid-February, late February at the latest, and we still haven't gotten it. But we've been in contact with them, and we should have it delivered the week of May 20th. So it's late.
So because of this, and, you know, of course, we didn't need it this year, but if things were normal, we would have needed it.
Yeah.
Deb is instituted some policy in the department to check up on bids at certain intervals to make sure they are moving along. You know, the guy had the bid, he had the date, and they hadn't even started building it yet. So that's kind of frustrating.
Yep. So now we're going to call every month on all of our bids that are out and make sure they're on schedule.
Have we got you on yet, Al? Okay.
Deb, do I have audio? Because I have another update for you.
Okay. This is Ty.
Go ahead, Ty.
Everest, which makes our dump bodies, Canada has shut down all the industry up there. They are currently only working on governmental important projects. They only have, I think, the 11 people in that whole factory working. So I can't even tell you when they're going to reopen. We have 2 ordered from them. The truck is on the truck itself, the international chassis. We should probably have it 3-4 weeks.
So we have 2 ordered, or does the automatic not come from there?
Or I'm sorry, 3 trucks, correct. 3 bodies, 3. The 3 chassis are on schedule, no problems. But they're getting built in Texas. But the bodies are up in Canada. Correction, there's 3.
Brian, did you have a question?
Yeah, are we suggesting we should be going out to bid to another truck body firm, or are we just on hold? What are we suggesting here?
I'm suggesting a hold because I'm even hearing locally. I believe the city of Glens Falls, I was told, still waiting on bodies from September from another manufacturer. I don't believe we're going to get them any quicker. Alamo, I found out, pretty much owns 3 of the 6 companies. You know, I can look around and ask on how far other companies are out, but I think I think everybody's kind of in the same boat.
Yeah, that's correct. Putnam's in the same boat. We're waiting on one.
Are there any local companies that could, you know, that haven't got work to do that could make these and make them just as reasonable? I mean, is that an option too? I mean, I'd like to look out for local companies if there's anybody that would do this for us. I mean, I just don't know.
I can check. I can tell you that the local company is the one that's out 6-7 months. The one that's close in town, and it's not their fault. They're waiting on everybody's waiting on the manufacturers.
Okay.
Thanks, Ty. I see we have Al on now, right?
I'm working on it.
And I can add where I couldn't talk a little earlier if I may. The body spec is not, I mean, we could have 4 potential truck bidders, only 2 prefer to bid for whatever reason. It's not, the spec is not that tight. It's a pretty fair spec.
Okay, thank you, Todd. Whenever you're ready, Al, on the carpool.
Okay, what do I have to do to share my screen? Click share screen, huh?
Bottom center, it should say share screen now.
Yeah, it says host has disabled participant screen sharing.
Tim, your phone works.
Try again.
Try again, he said.
We didn't want to surprise you.
There we go.
All right, can you see the screen now, folks?
Yep.
Yes.
Very good. So carpool, I'll start with a very, very quick tutorial for those of you who aren't familiar with how the carpool works. The carpool is a special revenue fund where we record the purchase, repair, and maintenance of the county's carpool and fleet cars. The revenue sources are mainly from the other departments. In 2008, the mileage rate was set at 45 cents a mile. And in 2016, there was an additional resolution for cars that were not barred out of the carpool, and they're charged 35 cents a mile. So for those of you that were not here then, we buy some cars out of general fund now for social services because that only becomes a 25% county share. For those cars not bought out of the carpool fund, the carpool fund still does charge 35 cents a mile because they're still tasked with the repair, the maintenance, you know, the regular oil changes and all of the parts when something goes wrong. So that's the genesis of the revenues. This report will be attached to the minutes later so that you can kind of go back and review it. I've attached a 6-year balance sheet showing you the history of where we've been with the carpool, and same thing with a 6-year income statement. The reason that we're bringing this up today is because we have a significant problem that 2 years ago, if you remember, Chris brought to committee that there was problems with both the carpool and the road machinery that we're going to have to take a deeper dive into. Unfortunately, that deeper dive has been exacerbated by our current situation, and we now have to seriously talk about specifically the carpool fund. So you can see on the screen now that we went from $48,000 in purchases in 15 to $389,000 in 2016. That's the year that we brought all of the sheriff cars from general fund over to carpool so that we had kind of a one-stop shop for all of our cars. We knew the inventory, we could control them. We knew what the replacement cycle was going to be. So that's why there's that significant jump in 2016. So here's our current issue in a nutshell. We ended 2019 with only $144,000 fund balance in carpool. The current cash balance in carpool is only $87,000. As you know, during the closure right now, there's very little carpool use being used other than maybe by the nurses and a little bit from the DSS workers that have to go out on some runs still is my understanding. The budget, if you were to look at the 2020 budget, the budget's fine. The revenues that are projected at the time that the budget was done are appropriate for what you could have expected. You know, if you go back to the previous slide where I showed you the revenues and expenses for 6 years, the 2020 revenues as projected are in line with what they should have been if it were not for the closure. The other problem you have to remember is that the carpool revenues in the budget are the budget for the revenues coming in over a 12-month period. So unlike general fund where it gets all its taxes up front, carpool trickles its $800,000 or whatever in over 12 months. So if you have $300,000 of purchases and you make them all in January, you have not got the 12 months of revenue in yet. So you have a cash flow problem, which goes to why I'm always harping about fund balance, because fund balance is your cash flow for situations like this. Because the fund balance in carpool drew down to 144,000, you now don't have the cash flow to make your purchases early in the year. However, in March, the superintendent made 3 purchase orders for her trucks. Again, that's normal operating procedure for her. That's nothing out of the ordinary for her. Her budget was adopted. The budget officer signed her request, and it was made well before I closed the books. So neither Dan nor Deb could have known the financial position of carpool at the time the purchase orders were made. However, there's 3 purchase orders out there for $156,000. And as I showed you, we only have $87,000 in cash. I still have another $70,000 in payroll for the rest of the year. And there's going to be a significant, as you can assume, reduction in the amount of money coming in from other departments because they're just not using the cars. So the revenue projection for 2020 is going to be way short of what's in the budget. So you've got a fund balance problem, a cash flow problem, and now you have a 2020 revenue problem. With 3 purchase orders out there and no cash on hand to pay for them currently when they come in. I think that's as brief in a nutshell that I can paint you the picture of where we are. Part of how we got here, again, for those of you that weren't here at the time, during the 2018 budget process, there was a resolution made during the budget process to move $360,000 from the carpool fund to general fund to fill some of the general fund gaps in that budget year. That resolution was not made by the budget officer, just for what it's worth. That resolution was made under the premise that there was seed money sent from general fund to carpool fund. What is unfortunate is in my preparation for this meeting, I discovered that while it was in the plan to seed the 2016 purchase of the sheriff cars, that transfer was never done. So basically what we did is we returned $360,000 from carpool to general that never actually did come from general to carpool. So what it looks like happened in 2016 is we actually budgeted for an increase in revenues to offset the increases in expenses and never actually seeded the actual cash. So that's part of how we got here. The other part of it is we've had, since I showed you in the previous slide, since 2008, the mileage rate's been 45 cents and has not changed. And I would argue that the price of cars has significantly changed since 2008. So our reimbursement rate that we charge ourselves hasn't kept pace with the replacement values of the car. Because remember, carpool is one of those funds that should be self-sustaining. The money that comes into the fund should be the money that's used to replace the cars. It should kind of be a self-fulfilling prophecy, so to speak. But with the mileage rate not changing and the price of cars changing significantly, that's not going to happen. So at some point this year, we will have to talk about those rates. What I'm putting out there as possible paths forward, number one, an immediate freeze on any other purchases out of carpool. So the 3 horses that are out of the gate, I can't put back in the gate. The superintendent can work with the vendors to see if there's, a conversation there that she can do offline and report back to us. However, the rest of her 2020 budget, I would say at this point, we need to freeze any other purchases right now till we know more. I would respectfully ask the board to consider returning some of the money that was sent out of carpool to general fund, because again, the money that was returned to general never actually came from general, that I've discovered this week in my preparation for this meeting. And even if it's not the whole 360,000, if a portion of that came back, it would be helpful. In addition to returning some of the money from general fund to carpool, you may want to consider an interfund loan from general fund to carpool fund. Because again, as the revenues trickle in monthly, by December, you could in theory pay back some of the loan to general fund. But the only thing I caution about a loan is if you loan the money and it's paid back, we'll be having the same conversation this time next year, which is why my recommendation really is to return some of that money that was taken from carpool. Because again, the premise it was taken was proven not to actually have happened. And then at some point when we get back together this year, because this is something I think that would be a person-to-person, face-to-face, sitting at a table conversation, is a review and a conversation about the rates that we charge ourselves. Because again, if the rate hasn't moved since 2008, we haven't kept pace with the change in the expenses of the vehicles. So regardless if we're buying 1, 2, or 5 vehicles a year, our rate hasn't changed with the increase in the purchase price of those vehicles. So it is time to have a conversation about the rates. That's as quickly and as succinctly as I can get the problem out to you all. Mr. Campbell?
Yeah, so just to clarify, because as I'm following along here and hearing what you're saying, there's two situations when you think about it. When you enter the year, at the beginning of the year, all the purchases happen. When this resolution would have taken place, I'm sure it came from Mr. LaPointe right at the final end of the budget process. We would have been flush with cash because you're right, October, November, you're right in that range. It's right at the time the budget's passing. So it would have looked like there was more money there than, it looks inflated, but it's not inflated. That's just the way it works. And then in January, you start buying vehicles again and the money starts going away. So I think part of it is just the situation is how it looked, and the fact that the seed money never went in, that's a whole different issue. And I guess we can't change that past, but I think that we're going to have to add some money to make it happen. The good news is the system's working. If we hadn't taken out money that wasn't seed money to begin with, we would still be in pretty good shape is the way that looks. Are you in agreement with that, Al?
Well,
other than changing the rate because of the price of the cars, I mean, that would take it too.
Right. If we're going to continue a $300,000 to $400,000 a year expense, if we're going to continue that level, then we've got to get at least $500,000 back in fund balance. So our gap to your point, Mr. Campbell, is almost exactly the money we took.
Yes. Okay.
Because you figure we ended at 147. I need about $500,000 for cash flow. It's either that or we have to wait and have the superintendent buy all our cars or purchases in November and December, which I don't know how logistically that is, how appropriate that is. I think Mr. Half had his hand up.
Yes, Al, way back when we were first talking about the reimbursement for carpool, I had suggested that in the policy, we simply put language in that says that we will match the IRS business reimbursement rate rather than have it fixed. Now, I know that in the 2020 budget, that expense of a higher rate was not figured into each department, but there has been a lot of breakage from COVID-19. If we were, now the reimbursement rate we have right now is about 10 cents a mile less than the IRS rate. I think it's 54.5 cents, I think, if I'm correct.
I think you're right.
Is there enough breakage where we could increase that rate now and maybe catch up when we all come back?
So I think there's two conversations, Mr. Half. The short answer is yes, I'm assuming that there's enough breakage to cover this year. The resistance in the past has always been that in order to plug the carpool hole, you have to dig a general fund hole. And of course, through the past 3 years, we've had some significant fiscal problems in general fund. So there was never a willingness to increase the expense in general fund that we kick the carpool can to a later date. Well, that later date is here.
Thank you.
Mr. Rozelle?
All the other departments have budgeted for carpool, use of the carpool.
I'm sorry, say again?
All the other departments that use carpool have their separate budgets for that, correct?
They have a line item for their expense, yes.
Okay, and how much could we save? The departments that haven't used that carpool in this time, to figure out how much they've actually got left in that line item to carry out the rest of the year, what the average use would have been from January until now, and put that in towards the carpool.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean, we could definitely look at the anticipated breakage in that line. I think we're going to still come up significantly short, but that would be a great place to start some of that. Yes, absolutely. And I don't know if Chris or Deb has anything that they want to contribute to this as well. Chris, you're on mute.
Mr. Rozell makes a very good point, and
You're muted, Chris.
I think I just am I good now?
I can
Still showing him.
hear.
That's it with my Twitter.
Your phone
Yeah,
ain't.
all right. Mr. Rozell makes a very good point, and it's an analysis I'm trying to pull together for finance next Tuesday. Yes, there will be breakage in general fund that we could apply to it, to carpool. I think in the long term, we need to make an adjustment to the reimbursement rate. I think in a brief check, I think Mr. Half was right. It's about 57.5 cents a mile is the current IRS rate. My back of the envelope calculations would suggest we need about a 20% increase in our rate, which would put us at 55 cents. And we could likely make that adjustment right now and be okay within the current appropriations as a general fund, not within each department, because public health and some of the other departments that have been continuing to operate don't have breakage. They're actually over already. But we might be close to being okay in general fund for the remainder of the year. There's also, I think we need to have a little more discussion about a couple of the options that the treasurer put forward. My immediate suggestion would be, I think the best solution for the carpool fund, but at the greatest cost to general fund, would be to authorize a $360,000 interfund transfer right now from general fund back to carpool to replace that fund balance that we took a few years ago. Short of that, because that will put a strain on general fund unrestricted fund balance, we could authorize at least a $200,000 or $300,000 general fund interfund loan to carpool as a stopgap. That would allow the treasurer to cash flow the current purchase orders that have already been encumbered that we cannot cancel, and then give us time to re-examine the spending plan for carpool for the remainder of the fiscal year, and then decide later down the road whether we are going to transfer money from general fund into carpool, or if we are going to try and take a longer-term approach and adjust the financial position through only a rate reconciliation moving forward. So those are two things I think we might need to send to finance for next week, would be the consideration of either an interfund transfer or an interfund loan.
Or some combination of both.
Yeah.
Brian,
Well,
Brian?
can we expand on this a little bit? Can we, let's see, if we break down the ones that aren't using carpool, that money's already in the budget and already would be going there in a normal reason anyway. And if you just raise the rate, it might take some of it, but might not take all of it. Could we move all the money along with what the rate, leave what would be there at the new rate, take all the money in between and just move it and not take it from your unexpended fund balance, just take it from within the regular budget, move it to carpool, and that way, I don't know what it would add up to because I'd have to look at the numbers, but if that all might add up, it might come up to 100,000, and that might be enough to do what we're trying to do without borrowing. We just move it within the budget, set the new rate, and see where we come out at year's end. I mean, we still might have to add a little, but that might work.
We could look at that.
Could.
Brian.
Yeah, it's gonna be a little problematic to accurately forecast what the carpool usage for the remainder of the year for other departments is gonna be, because we don't know when they're coming back, and I know some departments, if I use DSS as an example, they are currently utilizing carpool, but they're utilizing it at a significantly reduced fashion because they are only doing visits that absolutely have to be done. Upon resumption of somewhat normal operations, there is going to be a huge surge in the number of visits that need to be conducted to catch up on some of the work that's been delayed for the last 8 weeks. So what I don't have a great sense of is I can see what a department's usage for the first 2.5 months of the year and what their usage last year was. I can forecast that forward, but what I can't anticipate is when normal operations are going to resume, and upon normal resumption of operations, what is that spike of utilization going to be? So we can come close, but there is some there's some error in there that'll leave us one way or the other.
Mr. Wilson?
That's good discussion. Thank you. I think where we were headed with it was because of the situation we're in, the crisis that has presented itself, we're into a central management of the carpool period. So we started down this discussion. Maybe it's time to consider harvesting back all the individual department line items that were set aside in the budget for this year. That all comes back to a central management. And if we get that spike, we're going to have to look at if that doesn't cover what we're talking about, we get that spike, we may have to transfer from the general fund to keep the fleet going, particularly for the essential services that we're talking about. So what I'm suggesting is this year may be a year that we don't operate as normal. It's a little more centralized, and we dictate kind of how we're going to do that.
Now,
Sue? Oops. You're on mute, Sue.
Chris, on the COVID-19 tally that we're keeping, will DSS be part of that with domestic violence and mental health issues? So that carpool
Yes,
would be included
their
in that?
carpool is already roughly, their carpool is already roughly 75% funded by a combination of state and federal funds. It'll be a little bit complicated to tease out of the visits that are being conducted currently during the operational shutdown. What I can make a compelling argument is COVID-19 directly related, but anything that I can make that compelling argument for, we will take the 25% local share of those costs and apply them to the federal reimbursement request.
Yeah, thank you.
Fair.
Brian, did you have a question?
Well, yeah, I was just going to go a little further with what Chris said. Chris was taking it to a real deep level, and I was thinking of a more shorter look, like if we next month will be the halfway mark. And so if you divide it in half what their budget is this year, and you just take what it is at the halfway mark then and say, this is your difference, and take maybe 2/3 of that, just a very simple process, and move it forward that way, just to get enough to keep the thing until, like Daryl said, then when we get to October and November and we say, hey, it's either going to make it or it's not going to make it, and then we decide if we have to move money. But I would definitely leave enough in their systems to make sure the new rate would work.
I think the treasurer is looking for a recommend. Okay, Al?
yeah, so not to prolong this any longer, but I need to throw something out there because one of my favorite mugs that I've distributed to a couple employees of the county is Washington County making easy things difficult since 1784. Let me just throw something out there because it's a little bit outside of the box. We're right now fighting internally, not fighting like Duke's up, but fighting emotionally about a self-imposed box. We're talking about what the correct rate is for carpool and who's going to use what. Kind of a drastic solution to this, but might be a little bit of common sense. Carpool could, because we draw the box, carpool could be funded the exact same way that county road is. So if we took all of the line items in general fund that are carpool expenses, added them together, made them an interfund transfer and transferred carpool its money in January, they would just get front loaded with all their money and there we go. We don't charge ourselves a rate. We don't worry about, we just, whatever the carpool line item is in general fund, that's the interfund transfer. It's not any more money. We're just taking it from the department budget and putting it into an interfund transfer budget. That gets done in January. We fund them right up front and they have their operating cash for the whole year rather than waiting for it to come in over 12 months. There's no billing done by Deb's department. There's no billing done by my department. There's no tracking the amount of miles used. There's just a contribution from general fund to carpool and we get on with our life.
That sounds better to me.
What's that?
Something to think about.
Well, I mean, Al, that's kind of what I was proposing for this year. And if we don't want to live with that box for future years, we can say, because we're in the crisis, that's what we do now. And we get through it. And we got time then for the remainder of the year to look at if we're going to continue to work that way or just readopt the way we have been operating with some of the changes that we've discussed that Chris has put forward.
Because I can't even imagine the amount of staff time it takes Deb's people to track all of those cars and all those miles and all of the gas usage. It's self-imposed. It's not necessary.
Mr. Shaw?
Yes, I make the motion, we move this to finance with all the input we have down that Chris and Al come up with a plan. Especially there's been a lot of good suggestions here and have the numbers and be prepared to make a decision at the finance committee.
Sounds good.
We have a motion from Is he on the committee?
Yes.
Okay, we have a motion from Mr. Shaw. Is there a second? I hear any second?
Yeah, I'll second it.
Okay, we've got a second. All right. Any more discussion on sending this to finance with Al and Chris working up some scenarios from the information we've discussed?
I just got one
Okay.
question.
Okay, John.
If we're short on money now, how are we gonna outlook for a year ahead in that process? Find out where the budget's gonna end up. So I just wanted to inject that discussion from finance.
Anybody else? All in favor of moving it to finance? Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. Deb, do you have anything else?
No.
Deb says she's done. Did we get Joe back? We had a note that he had an issue come up to take care of.
He said he had nothing to report. We didn't expect that he was there.
Okay, so we're not gonna move on any of the stuff then. So, does anybody else have anything more? All right, Mr. Hicks.
Yeah, are we going to talk about the restart plan for DPW that Deb sent out yesterday?
Oh, I'm sorry. Do you wanna, we can do that, Matt. You have comments to start out and Deb will answer questions?
Did everybody get it? I know you forwarded it to Dana, so I think everybody has it.
Chairman?
Did everybody get it?
Yes.
Okay.
Chairman?
So was there any questions on that, comments, concerns?
Got Al.
What's that?
Al.
Oh, Al.
Al,
Chairman, just before we leave sewer district, can I ask you to send to finance a budget amendment for a contract that for sewer district number 1 engineering? I'm not sure why he said he didn't have anything. I know that he needs a budget amendment for a sewer 1 engineering contract. If you could just move that to finance, I'll have the numbers for you.
I'll make that
Okay,
motion.
let's do that quick. Okay, we got a motion, second?
Second.
Okay, we got a second. All in favor of moving that to finance?
Aye.
Aye.
Say aye.
For the minutes, it's for Wright Pierce.
Opposed? We all set on that, good.
Thank you, Chairman.
All right, back to, yes, thank you. Back to the DPW startup, is there questions on that? Matt?
Well, I think, I appreciate Debbie putting this together. So you're talking about trying to get half the crew back on the 18th and the balance coming back on the 1st. And between now and the 18th, I mean, it's kind of vague here, but you're going to put together some policies and procedures regarding wearing masks and PPE and guys in trucks and all that kind of stuff, which I assume you'll share with us.
So here we go right back to, do you want me to write the policy for my department? Is that what you're saying when you
No.
ask that? Because, like, I'm saying that if the county has a policy on masks, we're gonna implement that policy. Is that what you mean?
No, I'm not asking you to do it. I'm just saying, what is the policy and who's writing it? And can we see it before the 18th, just so that we know what it's all about? So if somebody says, hey, I saw so-and-so without a mask, and we can say, well, the policy says this. I just want to know.
So we're working.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Hicks, you raise a good question. So, oh man, all my weeks blend together here. Maybe 4 weeks ago, the governor passed an executive order that said that all employers have to provide cloth face coverings to all essential employees. And he gave us, 3 or 4 days to comply with it. In response to that, we scrambled and wrote it is not a policy because the policy would have to be set by the board. We came up with what we call an acknowledgement form, and we issued 2 cloth face coverings to every employee who was reporting physically to work and had them sign the acknowledgement form. To Deb's point, as she and I discussed the reopening of her department, she didn't want to, quote unquote, reinvent the wheel or come up with a separate policy for DPW if the county already had a policy. So, what I think our intent is to have a discussion at finance next week, or government operations, wherever you want to start it. My thought was finance, of basically outlining in a very brief policy snippet that could be perhaps inserted in the employee handbook, something that just takes what we have in the acknowledgement form for the cloth face mask and puts it into a policy. That's in anticipation of DPW and other departments starting to reopen. I think I mentioned this at the board meeting last week, that we wanted to have something on the books to give our managers and our department heads some kind of policy background to be able to say, you shall wear a mask in these situations. And so in brief, what our little acknowledgement form spells out that we would like to turn into a policy with your approval would be basically that all employees must wear a cloth face covering when they are on work time and cannot adequately social distance. And then that would cover DPW as she starts to bring back her employees. So if they're out in the field and they're going to be more than 6 feet apart, and they don't require any kind of a face mask for whatever job they're doing, they wouldn't have to wear one. If they are riding 2 people in a truck, they would both have to be wearing a face covering. If they are at the, in the barn doing a morning briefing with their foreman getting their assignments for the day, they would need to have a face covering on. So I think that was Deb's point, was she didn't want to get into trying to come up with when people shouldn't wear masks if we were going to have some kind of a policy for the county as a whole.
I just wanted to make sure that I want to make sure that there is one as opposed to what's in it. As long as there is one and they have these rules to follow, that's fine. And I guess, Mr. Skelly, Chairman, the 800-pound gorilla in the room is the time and a half issue. Is this all going to be considered time and a half? Are we talking about changing time and a half issue starting on the 15th, on the 1st? When are we going to air this all out to know when we're starting back, eliminating the time and a half, and what part of the DPW is part of that? That's a discussion. I don't have the answer to that. I just thought it's a discussion we should start now instead of waiting till the last minute.
Matt, I agree with you, and I think we should move that discussion to finance. I know I have several of my constituents in my town are kind of wound up about it, that once they go back to work, that it ought to be straight time. And they're frustrated that the people working in Market 32 and Stewart's and everything else that are meeting people all over hundreds a day aren't getting time and a half. I know FEMA is saying they're going to cover it, but you know, other people are working at-risk places too. That's just, I've had some people right in my face on that. So the rest of you may or may not have. And I think finance, we probably ought to discuss it again.
No, I have too, Jay. I think you're absolutely right. The question that we should know ahead of time, Chris, the answer to is how does eliminating the time and a half or transitioning from the time and a half issue impact with the emergency statement, and how those are all tied together? Can they be separated? Can they be separate? Can we have a little bit of local control of what we're doing, or are they all tied in one big package and we're either all in or all out?
You want to answer that, Chris?
Yeah, as of now, the way the resolution that was passed on March 18th is worded is that when the county is operating under an emergency closure order, which we are and have been since March 18th, then any employee, any hourly employee who is asked to report to their workstation is paid at hazard pay of time and a half. So you as the Board of Supervisors could amend that resolution and make it certain duties and not other duties. You could rescind that resolution and remove hazard pay, or you could ask the chairman to rescind the emergency closure order. So you have several options as to how you can move forward with that. But currently, to answer your initial question, the way that the current resolution was adopted is that anybody who is reporting to work, and whether that's at the municipal center or a highway barn or a park per se, if we had the parks open, anybody who's reporting to work while the county is under an emergency closure order would be paid the hazard pay of time and a half.
Mr. Hack?
Chris, doesn't that policy say non-essential workers, not just any workers? Because I understand that the deputies are not getting time and a half to be on their normal shifts.
Yeah, they are.
I know that the deputies are getting time and a half.
So everybody is getting time and a half, whether they're declared essential or non-essential.
All hourly employees, yes.
We need to, I think when we have our Board of Supervisors meeting on the 15th, we need to rescind the emergency order, have everyone come back, regular pay, regular overtime, come back to normal, not the new normal, the old normal.
Ms. Nolet?
So I also, Chairman, you made a statement that I need to talk about an email that we received this morning. I'm assuming it was going to come up at finance, but since you mentioned it, and I know I can't not tell you because I found out this morning, FEMA is not going to cover the time and a half. I just received an email about an hour and a half ago.
And there's no free lunch?
There is no free lunch.
Wow.
Surprise, surprise.
I want to make sure that, because I know that right now, so I need to share that with you.
Matt?
So just to clarify, we have multiple options here. We can amend the existing resolution in any manner, shape, or form we'd like, either in finance and then next Friday formally at the board meeting to change any provision of that original resolution. Is that right, Chris?
Yep.
He said yes. Yep.
Okay, I hope that's on the table then. Thank you.
Ryan?
Yeah, I want to go back to
Ryan.
earlier on the wearing the mask. As far as highway goes, I get that, you know, when they're 6 feet apart, they don't have to wear them. but I want to also interject, there's a safety issue. Those people are working around heavy equipment. They need to hear each other. Notice I talk loud. I've worked around heavy equipment too. And I really think that it's important that there's safety. They could catch the COVID, but that'd be a little bit easier to survive than getting run over by a payloader. So I would like them to be able to hear each other. And if they, if they're a little lax on the mask, I could live with that better than I could somebody getting hurt. I guess that's where I'd like to go with that. Just to make sure safety is figured in that, is in your actual everyday safety, not just the COVID. I could go there.
And any other discussion? I think finance is going to be busy. If there's no other discussion, I think probably the next meeting's getting ready to go, so I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Well, before we adjourn, I don't think the PPE, the guidelines and associated policy, if you will, for PPE wear goes to finance. I think that's could be a government ops issue. Chris, and I'll let you guys figure that out, but I don't think that's a pure finance issue. That's all employees.
No, that.
By those.
Anything else? Motion to adjourn?
Moved.
Mr. Wilson and Mr. Campbell. All in favor? Aye.
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 Thank you.
So is it all over or do we,
Green? Yep. They heard me before anyway.
Looks like everybody is here on the screen. Minutes, so we get a chance to look at the minutes, and do I have a motion to accept the minutes?
I make the motion.
Okay, we have a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
To accept the minutes? Opposed? Motion, minutes accepted. First up, EMS advisory appointments.
There's 2 appointments that have been submitted for the EMS Advisory Board. One of them is Holly DeSorty, is replacing Roberta Brown for the Argyle EMS, and we also have the recommended appointment of Mel Lambert from the Greenwich Fire and Rescue, I believe it is.
Greenwich Fire, yes.
Greenwich Fire Department. Those 2 are seeking appointment to the EMS Advisory Board.
Dave, I'll move it, Deb.
Say that again? Who's?
That was
Dave O'Brien.
Okay, second?
Have it here.
Sue, did you have? Okay. Any discussion? All in favor of the appointments?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Appointments accepted. Alternative sentencing update?
Yes, good morning, Don. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, Mike?
Yep.
Okay, great. I just wanted to give you a brief update. Currently, release under supervision, we have 20 defendants on, and until this morning, we had 4 clients on electronic monitoring. The other programs, the drug and alcohol program is conducting cognitive behavioral classes through Zoom with the clients, so we're staying in contact. Overall, our office is meeting by Zoom at least once or twice a week. And I'm in contact with most program staff on a daily basis, some more than that. But community service clients that were assigned prior to COVID-19 that were assigned and can socially distance safely are still continuing to do that. And just overall, the program staff, some collateral benefits that I've seen from this whole experience, communication. I'm seeing more communication because they're copying me on everything. It's from people that generally sometimes struggle face to face to have a great working relationship. But for some reason, it's working. I hope I can carry that over once we all get back in the same room. So we're very fortunate that all staff can access their database. IT's been very supportive. I can't say enough for them. And they're working remotely from home. They're taking advantage of this time to do the best evidence-based webinars and training as possible, and utilizing technology as much as we can. The challenges that were faced with COVID were, I would say, with clients, you lose the face-to-face connection, which helps build a relationship. So with those that don't have the ability to Zoom, which we do use as much as possible, that has been challenging, but we're working through it. And also on the administrative side with the state, with our funding being, a lot of it is performance-based contracts, so we have to hit certain milestones to be reimbursed at the county. And they've changed the milestones to make them more conducive in the fact that courts are not meeting. So, but there's no issue. I don't have any issue at this time to report about concern on funding. I know third and fourth quarter are going to be challenging, but right now we're controlling costs. First pay period, I had 12 and a half hours of staff on the field. Second pay period, I went to 14 and a half hours. Then in the third pay period, since we've been out, there was 34 and a half hours due to a domestic violence case that required us removing the young person we were monitoring and the family out of that residence. So that's it. We're controlling costs and keeping people safe, and that's about it. And I'm on the Youth Bureau side, since I have you, and I Sue's on the call. Anything that was scheduled is going to be postponed until we can do it safely. There's no doubt about that. And as far as funding from OCFS, we haven't heard anything at all. We're still waiting to get the 2021 allocations, which I'll let you know what they are. And as far as a safe harbor, working with sexually exploited at-risk youth, those cases are coming from DSS pretty steadily. So I know they've been busy, but that's all I have, and I can answer any questions you might have.
So,
you've got 4 and you went to 20 for monitoring. Do you expect that to go higher?
The 20s who were released under supervision. So it means that they were ROR'd, released on their own recognizance, but with a stipulation that they have to maintain contact. And depending on the risk level, it varies what the contact is. So we had 20 since the pandemic has held steady. Out of the 20, I had trouble with 3. So while we were on our break here, I received a call back from the defense attorney representing 2 of the same, had 2 of the clients that had missed the contact with us. So the attorney is reaching out to his clients, and we're keeping the court apprised when there's any variations where someone's not following the rules. The court, and as well as the district attorney and their defense attorney.
Mike, so you don't require bracelets, electronic monitoring, ankle bracelets? You
Yeah,
have
we
enough?
had 4.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we started with 3, then we had a a pending probation violator placed on EM. I'm sad to report that this morning at 7 a.m. she cut her bracelet off. The person suffers with mental health as well as substance abuse. So anyway, we retrieved the equipment by 9 a.m. and notification's been sent out to probation officer. And from there, because it was a probation referral, they'll forward the information to the courts as well as district attorney, probably, and defense attorney.
Okay.
Or have it just picked up on a warrant.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Any other questions for Mike? Mike, when we resume full operations, do you anticipate any issues or problems that we should be aware of? Funding or?
No, Chris the Bold asked for a projection, and based on our funding and honestly, our performance-based contracts, the fiscal year ends in June, and we had already met the milestones prior to June, so we're claiming, as quick as we can, knowing that any unclaimed dollars are at risk possibly. So we're claiming. I don't see the budget impact until I get further direction from the state. I mean, the governor could come back in third and fourth quarter and cut allocations. That's been done before. In 2008, it was done. It's hard. As far as the performance-based stuff, we are on track to meet our milestones. Any changes to that, I'll get you going. As far as creating a surge of work and requiring overtime, we're going to manage that. I have a budget. We're going to operate in budget. And as far as the planned work, that'll be prioritized and adjusted accordingly. So no, Don, I think we should be all in decent shape.
Thank you, Mike. Any other
Hey,
questions?
You're welcome.
Mike? Bill?
One more question. Community service is not an essential service, right?
No, it's not. But
Just wondering.
well, until we get further direction on when lifted the New York pause lifts, then we can look at things as far as we have to worry about the logistics of transportation, how we're going to handle that proper, safely. Now we have a ton of work to do. I mean, there's no shortage of work, but how we do it safely is maybe when we do projects in the town, we only assign people that can get there, to that site, and we'll work around the other things, but we do have community services being performed in a safe manner right now. But they're not being supervised by my staff. They're being supervised, which leads me to working with Roger and Chris about developing in the future MOUs with every community service site that we have. And that's something that I'd like to present to you within the next couple of months. So.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Don. Thanks, everyone.
John, code enforcement.
Good morning, everybody. Just wanted to give you a quick update on how things are going in code enforcement. I've been showing up Mondays and Thursdays in the morning to the office to check the mail for any new applications. I've also been doing the CO searches so that it's not holding up real estate transactions, so that part of the equation can continue. We got our new code books. The new code kicks in the 12th of this month. So everybody who was getting the actual paper copies has their copy. Everybody has the new working work cell phones. So people can reach out to them directly. They don't have to leave messages at work, and then our crew has to call in and retrieve the messages and all of that kind of stuff. IT is working out the final kinks for everybody to be able to have access to our database and our code application so that we can do that remotely. We're taking in new applications as of 2 weeks ago. We've had 50 as of yesterday. We've had 50 applications turned in. Half of them have been approved. 18 are waiting for additional information from the applicants. And 7 were in the process of, they're in the queue to be reviewed. We're not doing any inspections as a general rule right now. But we will do them for, like if somebody needs a final certificate to get paid, you know, if it's the contractor, or if somebody's looking for a final certificate for moving into a new house or something, if the bank requires it. I've gone out and done those. Still following through with any emergency complaints, going out and inspections on those if needed. As we're moving forward, when the office actually reopens, we're going to be really busy getting everybody caught up and getting all of our files caught up from where we left off to where things stand on that day. So we'll have to do inspections of what we've done during the off time. We'll have to do depositions describing, having the contractors describe what they did that we can no longer see. So like the insulation, if they put the insulation in and then sheetrocked, well, we're not going to see the insulation. And when state restrictions are lifted, there's probably going to still be another jump in new applications. Not necessarily everybody knows that we're taking them in now. I had Tim Hardy send out the information in all his different channels that we are accepting new applications. And our voicemails on our phones all describe the process, what they would need to do for that. So, but overall, things are going pretty smoothly considering where we're at, what we can do and what we can do. There's going to be some hurdles when we get back into it, but I think we're pretty well poised to get through it pretty quickly when we get there. So,
John, what are some of the hurdles you expect?
Just some of the stuff that I already mentioned. Just time-wise, the depositions, having to get everybody caught up on those, having to go out and do inspections for what they've already done. Getting people suddenly dropping off a whole bunch of applications because they don't know we're doing them yet, or at this point. So, plus we're going to be dealing with people learning that there's new codes, so, or adjusting to new codes.
Mr. Half?
John, did you say that you're doing the final inspections? What about the interim inspections for like the septic tank, the electrical, things like that? Because, you know, people go out and they get a mortgage, they build a home. Yep. You have periodic inspections. National Grid waits on some of those inspections to come out. Are those interim inspections, are they all on hold right now?
They are, but what we have on our messages is if you are calling to do an inspection, to take pictures of what you've got, and we'll do a deposition to get back to the office so we can get caught up on that part so that they can continue with their work.
But will you release a statement that says the deposition was approved so that the bank can release additional funds as the construction goes step by step?
If those come up, then yes, we've been doing that. So yes.
Here's a crazy idea, but Tim has quite a few drones. Can you use a drone to do any inspection? To fly over a house, zoom in, do anything like that? Would that help you?
I don't think it really would. Nothing is really presented so far where anything like that would help. The tricky part with doing inspections is we would have to go into the office to get the paper files the actual folder that has all of that in it, we would have to go into the office, which is right next to public health. So we've been trying to limit all of that to the very bare minimum. I haven't heard any issues as far as people needing inspections and they weren't able to get them. So like I said, things seem pretty smoothly, so.
So if somebody needs an interim inspection, they have a deposition, photos, is the best way to mail you a package? Is that the best way for you to get the information?
At this moment, we're not doing anything with inspections. They're just doing their own thing. And when we open the office back up, we'll catch up with all of that stuff to bring our files up to date. If
Okay,
it's
so
something
if
that
somebody
they
has
need,
somebody has a deposition and they
now
send you photos and everything else now,
then
that's going to sit there until you reopen.
doing the photos and the depositions, yes.
All right, but you said
But
you're
they can
coming into the
continue.
office, you said you come into the office Mondays and Thursdays in the morning to do backlogs. Is that just for the LRCC 1?
For the what now, I'm sorry?
Is that just for the LRCC number 1?
Going into the offices, you mean?
Yes. When you go into the office on Mondays and Thursdays, you said to do the, to clear out the backlog of paperwork. Are you only talking about the LRCC 1?
Whatever happens to be coming across our plate at that time. I've had some of the different inspectors ask me to check on things for them, and I'll call them up and let them know I've been checking the mail for new application.
Okay, so back to my first question. So if somebody sends into your office by the postal service, a packet of their deposition, sworn statement, photos, you will not work on that paperwork now? You are going to put that in a separate thing until you come back?
We haven't had them come in yet, but.
Okay, but if somebody did that, you could work on that, send back some kind of an approval letter so that they could submit that to the bank to get more money released.
Right, that's what I was saying before, is anything related to needing new money or the contractors needing to get paid, we take care of that as it comes along. That's not a problem.
Thank you.
John?
Who would you have sign the depositions? The owner or the contractor?
Whoever did the work or whoever, like if the homeowner saw the work done, whoever actually saw it or did it.
Okay, now how about commercial properties?
In regards.
Well, I know we've got commercial property here in White Hall that they're working on every day, just like there's nothing wrong.
Which project are you talking about?
Budget, the new budget end
Oh, okay.
project. And they're doing a lot of work there. Seems like in a big hurry to get through this.
I would have to check with Danielle on that as to what the status was of the permit beforehand. That was an issue that we had with that particular property before. So I would have to find some more details and get a hold of you, so.
I just wanted to bring the light.
What's up?
I just wanted to bring it to.
Okay. Yep. We would handle commercial projects the same way with the depositions anyway, but as far as if they're doing what they're supposed to be doing or have a permit to do what they're doing, that I'm gonna have to check on, because we've had issues before with that project. So.
Dan?
I suspect.
Yeah,
there are
Mr. Chairman,
folks out
my
there that-
question, I think, is,
We good, Dan?
yeah, Mr. Chairman, my question, I think, is directed towards Roger. Who determines at the county level? Is it the committee, your emergency committee determines which department and which worker is essential?
The chairman determines that.
Okay, the chairman. Is it wise, and I'm just throwing this out as an idea, if you declared the code enforcement essential, could that allow them all to start back in normal? I mean, it sounds like I'm listening to supervisors and the concerns they have in their each town. If you declared them essential with where we are right now in this pandemic, would that be a safe play? And then they could come back to work and sort out what needs to be done without us trying to keep throwing ideas out there like this? No, I'm asking the question.
That's a rhetorical question, I guess.
And would it be better and more efficient and maybe beneficial to the department? And because it sounds like they have the ability to meet all the requirements of the safety measurements have been put in place, and maybe get their department running up to full capacity and be a benefit to the local communities that want to get some of this stuff done.
One thing you have to remember, Dan, is if you bring back DPW and when they get if they get full strength, you're pushing the 50% number now, hard, because we're only supposed to bring back under the governor's order 50%.
To when? When is that deadline on that? Does he set?
We're looking at it the total, not by department.
Right, but what date is that? Didn't he set that to a certain date?
Right now,
Currently, that we are operating, as Roger was saying, we're operating under the 50% mandatory staff reduction.
Right.
That current order is in effect through next Friday, May 15th. After that, the only guidance we have from the governor's office at this point is that the easing of the current New York on pause and mandatory staff reduction and non-essential closures is going to be eased by region, starting May 16th. It is not our anticipation, because we are in the capital region, that we will be in the first wave. We don't know that yet. Second floor hasn't told us, but given that our numbers are going up, as is every other county in the capital region, our expectation is that it'll be North Country, Southern Tier, Finger Lakes that start to reopen on that May 16th. So to Roger's point, we've been averaging 160 to 180-ish employees a day. If you add the 90 employees of Public Works back at 100%, we are, 300 is about our 50% mark. So if you add the 180 and you add 90 to that, we're at 270. We're butting right up against the 300 mandatory number that we can't go over. So that's a very valid point that Roger raised. And we don't know, as of now, it expires May 15th. It's our expectation that it will be extended for us, but we don't know yet.
Thank you.
It's something to keep in the back of your mind while we're doing the numbers.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that part of the 50% part. I was thinking it was such a small department over there, it wasn't going to impact.
Right, and yesterday's, either yesterday or the day before, the governor basically had a spreadsheet or a chart on his screen that said nobody's met the criteria so far.
Yeah, 2 days ago.
So, 2 days ago?
Yeah.
Okay, Wednesday. So, that tells you something, but it's the 15th is the number now, but he's already said wait for further. So, I guess it depends on how you do the math, but we have to remember as we ramp things up. For example, I haven't brought anybody in for the first several weeks, and then because things are going on, and as the rest of the state starts to, like the courts are getting more familiar with how to use the technology, so they're scheduling more and more things, which requires then more and more things to happen in my office. And I'm kind of, I guess, a microcosm of some of the bigger folks like BSS, that have, quite a bit more interaction with everything. So you need to just keep the numbers in mind as we're doing this. We're looking at them like one department at a time here, but there's a global number that we have to keep in the back of our heads as well.
Correct.
It's easy to go onesie-twosies until the onesie-twosies add up to 10s, 11s.
Yep.
Chris, when the governor's office comes out with whether we're in phase 1 or not, will he do something every 2 weeks, or will it be when we get to that point, we become phase 1?
His indication at this point is that the status of each region will be re-examined every 2 weeks. That's what he's indicated. He hasn't said it concretely, but he's alluded to it several times, because each of his phases is separated by a 2-week waiting period. And he said it again in his press conference yesterday when he extended the rent relief. He said, I don't know what we're going to do when the extension comes up August 27th. He said, but we will continue, or August 20th rather, but we will continue to look at things every 2 weeks as we move forward. So the way I'm interpreting that, reading between the lines, is that there will be a snapshot on May 16th of, if he says, just for the sake of argument, these 3 regions can enter phase 1 of reopening. All the other regions are going to stay shut down for 2 weeks.
2 more weeks.
Then he will say, okay, in the last 2 weeks, these following regions have met all the criteria and they can go to phase 1. That's my assumption at this point. It's not concretely said.
The short answer is we don't know.
We don't know.
And it's also possible to go backwards. Theoretically, if the numbers change, and you can advance or you can actually go backwards.
Correct.
Under at least what he's indicating now, I see Mr. Hogan has his hand up there.
Hey, I apologize.
Mr. Hogan?
Yeah, I apologize that this is out there already, but Chris, is there an understanding of why we're included with the capital region?
So the short answer is that the state has never been successful in unifying all of the regions. So every department and every agency at the state has a different region. The short answer to your question is that the governor, when he set up the regional entities to look at reopening, used his existing regional economic development council structure. So the 10 regions he split the state into for his annual consolidated funding application process. We happen to reside within the capital region for that. And since that was the mechanism he decided to utilize to do, and what we understand at this point is that information is going to be funneled from the counties to the Regional Economic Development Council, and then the Regional Economic Development Council is going to have input to the second floor as the reopenings go on. So it's simply because we are in the capital region, economic development region, is why we are with Albany, Saratoga, Rensselaer, and Schenectady County.
All right. So can I ask, is this something that I'm receiving a lot of feedback on that topic alone? And it seems to be that maybe for that reason, for the Economic Development Council, it makes sense. But it doesn't appear Washington County's economy is not similar to Saratoga, nor Warren, nor Capital Region for that matter. So is there a way, I mean, would anybody else, and I just throw it out there, would it make sense for us to lobby to remove ourselves from that region and perhaps be applied to the North Country region?
Anybody? Sam?
Yeah, Senator Little and Assemblyman Steck are already addressing that issue. Supervisor Hogan, as of 2 days ago, I believe it was, we signed on to a letter in support of that.
And Supervisor Hogan, what we've heard is that the logical alternative to the capital region for us, obviously, is the North Country for both Warren and Washington County. What we heard was that the North Country does not want us. For understandable reasons, because our numbers are significantly higher than Essex, Hamilton, and Franklin County. Clinton's got a little bit higher numbers. So what Assemblyman Steck and Senator Little did was drafted a letter to the governor, and in it, what they asked for was that they understood the political reality that we would likely not get transferred from the capital region to the North Country, and there were legitimate reasons why the North Country maybe didn't want us. So what they advocated for in their letter was that while they understood the validity of the governor's approach to a regional reopening, they asked for latitude and for the executive to take into account that there are subregions within these economic development regions. And just to your point, that Warren County is very different than Saratoga County, and Washington County is the redheaded stepchild, I can say that because I'm a redhead, is very different than Warren and Saratoga County. So I think they struck a good balance of asking for a little bit of leniency within the regions and acknowledging that we are all a little bit different, but understanding the reality that we likely weren't going to get moved to a different region anyway. So I think you make a very valid point, and there are far more influential and smarter people than I who are working on that right now.
Have you got a copy of that letter?
Yeah, I just wanted to say to Senator Daphne Jordan also has done that, and asked the towns in her district to sign on to it.
Mr. Haff?
I think it's a good idea. My question is, who initiated this letter from the county? It sounds like you're doing it without any authority.
No, the chairman of the board did it with the authority that's vested in him under the state emergency management law. And they called on the phone. It was Dan Steck, Assemblyman Dan Steck called to ask us to entertain into that.
But how do you know that the rest? How do you know the rest of the board? It's a no-brainer. We're all in favor. But how do you know that without assuming that the rest of the board would go along with that? It seems like Matt says, you're way over your skis on this.
Could you
All right,
explain what that means? I don't know what that.
You're leaning far too forward than you should. I mean, I would see if it came up in this discussion, if the board would desire to inquire about leaving, but these kind of questions going out, again, we're not using the democratic process here, and I don't really think that is a valid emergency question. But this is what concerns me.
Well,
Things are done without us really knowing what's going on.
It is Supervisor Haft, if it's something that needs to get moving then, and if we want to see this become fruition before this exercise completely gets done, that's the reason that they have state emergencies. So you don't have to staff everything through 16, in our case 17 peoples, and take the time and refer from one committee to another committee to another committee to get something resolved.
Yeah, but
and it was just a standard request. It was a standard request that comes across our desk on a day-to-day basis anyways.
Okay, but we have a board of supervisors. We do not have county executive in this county. Okay. Before we close out code, I don't know if code has been closed out, but I have a question for John. Just to reiterate so I understand this. If a resident desires to build a home on a piece of property, they would fill out the LRCC number 1, which is an application for the building permit. You would try your best to go through that, mail back the building permit. Once they receive a building permit, these incremental inspections that normally would occur can be done by deposition. So once they receive the building permit, they do not need an on-location visit by your office. They can start construction if allowed, and then do the interim depositions in between.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions for John? Thank you, John.
I've got one.
John?
We're worried about hiring code enforcement back. Is there any way if we hire, say, DPW, I guess it would be contract, we've got to hire or have them all come back in? You can't leave 10 of them out so code enforcement can get back to work?
You were broken up.
I think, Mr. Rozell, if I heard your question correctly, was there a way for us to not bring DPW back at 100% strength in order to be able to have room under our 50% cap to bring code enforcement back? Was that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Short answer, yes. Long answer is it would be very complicated. Because of the Teamsters contract and seniority and bumping. Because the way we're hopefully going to work with the union to do the 50% is we are going to platoon it the way I mentioned at the last board meeting, which is that the first day you'll basically split all your barns into 2 teams. And the first week of the pay period, Team A will work 3 days, second week they'll work 2 days. Team B will work 2 days the first week and 3 days the second week. So everybody in the unit is getting the same number of work days. If we were to bring back, let's just say 75% of the department permanently, that will get us into some collective bargaining issues that are not insurmountable. They will just take us some time to work through with the union.
Jump in here too.
Hey, John.
According to the governor, the code enforcement departments are considered essential. The concern that Chris and I had been discussing previous is our proximity to public health. So if we had, 8 people coming and going in and out of there, are we possibly going to be getting public health exposed to something that could wipe them out or really hinder their ability to do what they're doing? So we've been considered essential all the way through. Maybe like 2 weeks after it all started, that's when they clarified that we were considered essential. So the reason why we're doing it the way we're doing it is trying to keep our crew out of public health's area, so that we're not exposing them to something. Because if we're going out in the field, like the couple inspections I've done, nobody else has been there. That was by design, but they've still, they might have left 10 minutes beforehand. So, there could still be issues from that. So we are considered essential. But the reason why we haven't been in the office is kind of a preventative steps. So that really hasn't changed. But I mean, you folks tell me if you want us to go back, we're itching to go back. So.
Thank you, John. Any other comments for Sue?
On the essential, that still falls under the New York State percentage? And if we were to bring the DPW back, would you have enough room in there where like public health had to grow? Let's hope it doesn't, but if it had to, would we have that ability?
So to your point, it's my opinion at this point that public health probably needs to add some staff. I know they're reviewing some applications at the moment. I'd have to look at the numbers more carefully to see where we've trended the last, this most recent week. I should probably get the staffing report from Sue in an hour or so. Our staffing is up, just as Roger mentioned. He's had to bring some staff in. I've had to bring some staff in. The county clerk has had to bring some staff in. So we have kind of onesie-twosied it over the last week, for lack of a better term. So I would need to reassess. I think in all likelihood, and I could have a firmer answer for you on government officer finance, but I think we could probably bring code enforcement back and still be under our 50% mandatory. We're going to be getting pretty close. But the issue that John mentioned is a significant one. It's actually working to our benefit right now that public health is over in the annex. They are somewhat isolated by geography at this point. I am very concerned about bringing not only code enforcement officers, but the public into the code enforcement office. And so if the will of the board were to get code enforcement back in the office as soon as possible, I might have to scramble with John and Buildings and Grounds to see about where we could temporarily set them up someplace else, which then poses all sorts of other logistical and operational issues. But we can certainly start to head down that road.
Setting us up temporarily in another spot wouldn't really work logistically because all of our files and things are in where we're at. We would need to have access to all of those if we're going to start going out and doing inspections and things. So relocating, I would think, is not really an option at this point.
Any other?
Yeah, one more question.
Comments?
Yes.
Sure.
And in the public code enforcement, is there a way to shut that door and have an entryway into their area that would be from the exterior rather than coming through that front door for a time?
There's no exterior entrance directly to our department. So
No, I know, but could there be?
No.
Okay, just wondering.
No.
Thank you.
unfortunately. It's a good idea, but not with the way that's configured, unfortunately.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Graham? Thank you. Public Defender's Office? Leon? He's not. Not on? Mike's not on?
I don't see him on.
District Attorney's Office, Tony?
Yep. Good morning, everyone. So their last night, probably around 10:30 or 11 o'clock, the governor issued his latest executive order that we haven't had a chance to get through all of it, only because it references multiple different executive orders by date range. But what it appears to do is continue the closure of local courts, I believe, through June 6th, and stays all timelines for the most part, with some notable exceptions, through June 6th relative to criminal procedure law. The notable exception, and there's the way in which the executive order leaves it somewhat unclear, so we're trying to work through that now. But there's a statewide push to begin conducting hearings and doing them. Unfortunately, the court system uses Skype for Business, so that is what is being pushed around the state. We've done some arraignments virtually, which has worked okay. We've done some court conferences, which work so long as the technology supporting it functions, and there's been some glitches there. But of real concern is if we move to hearings, that will fundamentally change what we're having to do, because those hearings would have to occur virtually. And in New York, we don't have a hearsay exception, so we would be needing live witnesses. So when we talk about density, et cetera, that is something we're monitoring very closely, because there's going to have to be where are we going to put witnesses, where are we going to be interviewing and preparing with witnesses, and then what are we going to provide them when they have to testify. So we'll certainly be keeping the chairman and you, Don, and Chris up to date as that develops. But that's the latest from last night. Right now, there are no trials. There's no grand jury. And so that remains a great unknown as to when they will be reestablished. As far as local court operations, and to address perhaps a question, Don, that you've posed to others, there's going to be some real challenges when the pause is released, not the least of which is, criminal justice in many ways is simply a conveyor belt, and new cases come in and you got to keep the belt moving so those cases can move off the other end, and the belt has stopped. But in just the short time that we've been paused here, I don't know what it is, 56, 57 days maybe, even with the significantly reduced operations of law enforcement in some regard, there's been 150 some arrests. And of those, there are 60 of those include victims. So there you have this building backlog that will be difficult on your local courts, certainly, to try to move those backlogs through. One of the things we've done, we've reached out to all of our local court judges with some decent success to get from them their calendars for vehicle and traffic, so we can send out plea sheets to at least reduce the volume of bodies coming into their courtrooms whenever they reopen. So hopefully that has some benefit. Certainly if courts reopen, then that will have talk about a trickle-down effect. Probation, alternative sentencing, our office, public defender's office, DSS, that will all have a direct impact on the level of staffing and probation, the level of staffing needed just to manage the workflow. Sort of an update as to what has this meant. Fortunately, we have developed incredible technological abilities in this county starting last year. And that allowed us, even though we've had to open 150 some cases during this pause, we've been able to get all that evidence in. We've been able to get those cases opened. Our victim specialists have been able to reach out to the 60 new victims to deliver services, to provide them with support, and gain information from them and direct them to resources. So really, without Terry's group and your all's support in terms of pushing this technology need forward, we would be, I don't know, I mean, we would be in a position that would be impossible to envision how we would move forward. So there's been some significant work that's been able to be done during the shutdown. We find we have a lot of victims that and brings with it a great deal of concern. So some of the things that we've been able to do by having access to the information online, those that we have phone numbers, we've been in contact with to keep them up to date as to what's going on. That's about 110, 115 victims. There's about another 100 that we don't have good phone numbers for. So letters are being sent to keep them up to speed. So that's been a positive. I think one of our concerns remains is, and we hear it on the news, certainly is the rise in domestic violence incidences. And I know Jeff was on, he can probably touch on that. And certainly Tim and Glenn and their group hear the calls on the radios. That is definitely a challenge that's going to be existing when we come back. But even more so is going to be the impact on our youth, our children. In the 2 months before the shutdown, we did 22 interviews at the care center. In the 2 months since, we've done 4. And that is, to me, very telling of how valuable and invaluable schools are to our protection of our youth. And with that loss, especially as we roll into a likely situation of no summer school, something that is going to pose a real challenge when the fall rolls around and these kids that are subjected to this reach a safe place where they feel they can share. So, something to be aware of in your communities, open to suggestions on how to try to help deal with that. And I think the last thing I had that's not on the calendar is with the continuing of the committees now, there will be vacation carryovers that will not have been able to be used prior to the expiration or the anniversary date of the employees. So I think that's a situation we're going to try to work through if there's any guidance either from Melissa or Chris. Or do we just send in the number and send them to you folks and then process that when things return more to normal?
Anything else, Tony?
No, I think that's about all I had for a rapid update.
Got a question if you can.
Dana?
Tony, your employees have basically been on vacation. So you're concerned that they haven't been able to use their vacation while they're home being paid to stay home?
Actually, they are working from home. And I know Chris gets the hours. I mean, they're all probably almost to a person are working 30 or more hours a week, doing everything that needs to be done, whether it's opening files, tracking down evidence, reviewing radio runs, interacting with victims, responding to FBI inquiries, state police inquiries, responding to motions, getting caught up. I mean, one of the biggest, one unexpected benefit of the pause was the discovery laws of 29 that were passed in the 2019 budget were retroactive. And so every single case that we had that was pending on January 1, all of the new requirements had to be met. So really this pause in having to be in local court has allowed us to get caught up. I mean, I think the one thing I've discovered on that that's been most telling is it really, the amount of desk time per case is incredible. I mean, it's gone from where I can review a simple misdemeanor DWI in 10 or 15 minutes to get ready for court. It's now a 2 to 3 hour proposition just by me alone, just to get through all of the discovery to turn around and push it out the door to defense. So
Those people that you're talking about that are working from home, they are salary, correct? They're not hourly, so they would not be getting hazard pay for doing that?
no, they're hourly and they're not getting hazard pay to my understanding because they're working from home. And so my read, and I could be wrong on this, but I'll defer to Al and Chris and the chairman, but my read of
That is correct. The hazard pay only applies to people who are physically reporting to work.
Thank you.
Yep. So, but I mean, again, though, Supervisor Half, because of the technology, they're actually able to do it. Otherwise, I don't know, I don't think the public health department would allow me to be shuttling files and paperwork from here to the office. I mean, I'm the only one touching most of the paperwork that comes in. So that investment has, I think if you could do an analysis of it, has probably paid for itself just in these 2 months.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Mr. Hanky?
How is the governor's extension of timelines and putting off the court system, do you think that's apt to survive a constitutional test of timeliness?
I think some of the executive orders probably would. I think there are some concerns with some of the Office of Court Administration's interpretation. But I think ultimately when you're in this type of situation, there is some broad latitude within some of the Court of Appeals decisions. And so I guess we'll find out when pleas start to happen and sentencing start to occur and appeals go up challenging whatever issues are raised.
I mean, it'll be 6 months or a year down the road, but I was just wondering if you thought we're going to wind up losing quite a lot of this stuff that is happening right now.
Well, the good news is, again, I wish Terry were on so she could hear me touting her department as much as I am, but we've continued to be able to push discovery out the door. So even though we're in this pause, where people have been arraigned, the discovery is being submitted to the attorney. Where they haven't been arraigned, it's a technological feature of DEMS, but it's moved from being reviewed to being ready to be turned over. So on the date of arraignment, we'll be able to turn all that stuff over. So that's been the biggest benefit of the stay, other than not having to have hearings. And so when those will be where the biggest challenge I think will be on a lack of hearings.
Thank you.
So,
a couple questions, Tony. On the local courts, our justice has said that he may need sheriffs to open back up on a few nights. Have you heard anything of that? And how would that be viewed to the town budget, through the county budget?
Yeah,
how would that be?
Well, I think the issue I see is going to be, sort of dovetailing off of the discussion at last week's board meeting, the steps you're taking to provide public protection and safety at DMV and the county clerk relative to separation. Your local courts are all going to be very challenged with who's going to police social distancing? How are we going to manage the number of people that can come into any given building? And the vast majority of our local courts do not have court officers. They're currently, one court probably isn't wide enough to have social distancing left to right. So those will be some of the, I'm glad you brought that up, because I should have mentioned that. I think those are some of the issues and I'm happy to work with anyone who wants to, but we should be looking at is how are we going to accommodate the sheer number of bodies and how are we going to militate the inflow of people when these local courts reopen.
Yeah. It's interesting. Thank you. I'm not sure how that, I was going to bring it up to the town board meeting because our local justice is asking for that support for sheriffs and I don't know which direction you would go. He says he has it in his budget, but is it coming from the county? How does that work?
Yeah, I think the communities that do, the courts that do have it, if it's,
yeah.
I think one of our town courts uses a village police officer. So the town would pay the village reimbursement or the court, out of whichever budget, but would pay for them being there. In our state courts, but we only have one, which is the county court, the state pays. Kingsbury has one, and I suspect Supervisor Hogan, that's probably covered out of their court's budget.
It is. Yeah, we have
Sorry.
Mr. Hogan?
So I don't know, unfortunately, how many people are aware. We unfortunately lost our town justice this week unexpectedly. Justice Keenan passed away at a very young age. We are just in the beginning steps of addressing his loss, both personally as well as professionally in our court. Tony communicated with me that we're in contact with OCA, but Tony, you see, I guess I wanted to ask you, do you have a feeling if we're unable to appoint somebody in the short term or in the interim, because there are some criteria that have to be met, and they have to make that appointment on our behalf, do they generally take it from our existing court within our area, or do they usually find somebody outside of the area? Do you happen to know, Tony?
Well, I think there's two ways to do it. One would be where I've seen it where you've had a judge who was sick. So for instance, when White Creek and the village of Cambridge had to deal with this issue, they used a neighboring town judge to stand in. Or when Judge Ackley passed away, the town of Jackson had someone from one of the local courts, I think it was the same judge, Judge Moley, came in and covered court. That's one option. I know Greenwich had a judge resign in the middle of his term, and they have replaced him with a completely new person. So I don't know that process. Chairman Ward would be able to probably give you good guidance there. But if it's going to be an acting judge, then that generally comes from an existing judge within the county.
So that
very
would
often a neighboring town, because I think there's a jurisdictional issue that they have to be from a neighboring town, is my recollection.
So Tony, could you foresee that the court backlog?
Mr. Hogan, I could set you up with Judge Hobbs, who's the supervising judge for all the local courts. He's a city court judge over in Glens Falls. He's probably the go-to guy in terms of who does what to who in the local courts. We'll see if I can get a hold of him and set you up with a conference with him to discuss what your options are.
Yeah, I think he's actually been included in some communication this morning. I guess my question was, do you see, if that could happen, could that exacerbate the workload and the backlog that you see, Tony?
It will be significant because, I mean, Kingsbury is by far our largest local court in terms of volume, numbers of cases, both in terms of criminal and vehicle and traffic. I mean, my last look, and it's been a while, but the numbers generally don't change. You represent about 1/3 of our overall business in terms of local court, of the 22. So, I mean, that is, this is the part I don't like, Mike's a great guy and was a good friend. And then it's also the business side where that's a huge hole that you're going to have to try to replace that has a huge impact all across the judicial system for us in Washington County.
But I just wanted to make everybody aware, unfortunately, that is out there.
Yeah, Tony, just one more question. There's only so many judges and so many hours in a day. So this backlog could stretch out for months and months. And
Well-
I think this impact stretches well into next year.
It could, our internal concern is we have 20 local court judges, I think, and a county court judge, and they're all independent, autonomous entities who are concerned, rightly so, with their own backlog, with their own schedules, and having to respond if they, we already have some that are trying to schedule additional days that are not traditional days. And we have backups that we already had. I think we've had 5 trials at county court level that have, that are now pending, not to mention the backlog in grand jury. So our concern is if they start unilaterally adding days, that will have an impact on our ability to cover certain courts at certain times. So all good points. The backlog will continue to stretch out. That's why, quite frankly, I think if we can move, 150, 200 vehicle and traffic tickets without those people coming into court, that will go a long ways toward addressing that challenge.
Any other questions for Tony? Thank you, Tony.
And no, thank you all.
Public safety. Tim?
All right, just running down through our committee report real quick. We sent it out this morning. Radio system project, we're still moving ahead with our planning for everything in the radio system project. We haven't done anything implementation-wise with the equipment that we have on hand right now, just because we're having difficulty making sure we coordinate the contractor safely. Our 911 phone system project is moving forward. We had our kickoff meeting with Warren County and the vendor 2 weeks ago, and we're planning to start implementation for mid-June. So that is moving along. Our CAD system project is still moving along. March 10th was our last group meeting on that. We have met remotely with IT and some of the other members of the group over a couple of different issues throughout. And we do not have another project team meeting scheduled for right now, but we are continuing our monthly scheduled reboots with the sheriff, IT, and our vendor. Just an update on the COVID-19 response this morning. Give you the numbers as they were at close of business yesterday. We're still doing the tallies for today, but our total PUIs was at 201. Our confirmed cases were at 174 total. That's active, recovered, and the deceased. Only 42 of those were nursing home cases, just for reference. Total active cases were 72, and the recovered were at 92. The deceased remained at 10 as of first thing this morning. So we'll have some updates this afternoon. The local officials and first responder leadership briefing continues every Tuesday and Friday at 3 o'clock as long as there's a need. Just a couple of communication center updates. The communication center is still on restricted access, so it's just communications employees only. We have been pre-screening our employees since early March, which includes a temperature check and the screening process that we talked about earlier, and some of the other departments are looking to implement as well. And we did have to implement a work safety rule for some of their outside employment just to make sure we keep them safe. Obviously, there's a pool of very small people that can do that job. So keeping them safe and making sure that we can keep them here and operational is extremely important to their safety, to our operation, and to everybody who counts on all of us. We did have quick response come in, and they performed a decontamination of the communication center and our offices on April 30th. So we were very thankful that they were willing to come here and take care of that for us.
Donated, right, Tim?
That was donated, yep. Just the communication center activity reports for the month of March and April that we usually put out are in the meeting packet. Our total CAD incidents for the month of March was 5,154. The phone calls were 9,649. And for April, it was 4,285, and phone calls were 8,304. The only other thing I just wanted to touch on, there have been, we've been doing the cloth mask distribution, which has gone over very well. I think we've gotten rid of actually all 22,000 that we were allotted in the original shipment. We have not received another shipment for us for public distribution as of yet, but we really appreciate the assistance from all the towns and the villages and the county departments that helped out with that, whether it was the event here, the town of Greenwich held a huge event, the town of Cambridge, White Creek, and Jackson did a good event down there that went in like 15 minutes past their scheduled time. So, and there are a number of other towns that acquired some and passed them out. So we really appreciate it. We did join up with Warren County on that Mask Up initiative. So we do have a drop box out front of the county building for anybody willing to make cloth masks to drop off. If somebody can't drop them off, they can contact our office and we'll arrange for pickup. And they're going over to Dr. Leach in Glens Falls, and he's sanitizing them and getting them back for public distribution. Yesterday, there was an amazing event held by the Salvation Army, the Tri-County United Way, Comfort Food Community, the Regional Food Bank of Northeastern New York at the fairgrounds. It was an amazing collaboration. I think they had about 360 vehicles, maybe 350 vehicles, something like that. Lots of volunteers, somewhere in the neighborhood of 200 volunteers. And it was really just an amazing thing to see. So a lot of people in need, certainly got a lot of service, and everybody came together. It was great for our communities. So if anybody has any questions, I think that's all we have. We're still moving forward with everything. Resource distribution is our, probably our day-to-day largest thing that we're taking care of, coordinating with the nursing homes, the towns, the villages, first response agencies. So we're still here.
And Tim, it was great, to get the masks. And our seniors, we mailed out 2 masks to each resident, and probably gotten back 15 or 20 phone calls and thank you notes from the seniors. The ones who didn't want to venture out to get their masks, so it was great getting them early so we could get them out and do that. And I think everybody in Washington County who wanted a mask, they were able to get them.
We certainly hope so.
Everybody around, 22,000 is pretty good. And by the time I hand out the remaining group I have, I'll be about 3,000 masks that we'll hand it out. Wouldn't have been possible without the coordination from your group. I really appreciate it, and I know all the other supervisors do with that. Quick question about your drones. It was a letter I got a call from some citizens, and they're the DJI drones made in China, I think, but they have 80% of the market from what I read. And I think 2 of the concerns are, one is through the internet, that when they're up there, they could get information from our infrastructure. I know we discussed it, and maybe you can mention supervisors how we avoid that issue.
Sure. Anything that's critical infrastructure, if we were to fly or have anything where there's a significant security need, all of those are enabled with local data mode, where we can turn off any transmission to the internet. So if we did any critical mission where it was anything we had concern over transmitting to the internet, we can turn that off. And originally this whole thing kind of surfaced maybe 3 weeks ago now, from something that came from high-level politics about the DJI drones and those kind of things from a couple of years ago, and it had been debunked a few times through some different studies over time. And there are obviously, it's not just us that's using these drones. There are Homeland Security agencies all over the United States that are using the same things, and they do have the security measures built in, same thing. So if there was anything that's considerably significant, confidential in nature, where you can't do that, we would use local data mode for that. But we're not tracking anybody personally. We're not taking temperatures with drones or anything like that. As a matter of fact, most of the drones that we have, if you go over 100 feet in the air, any accurate temperature, it'll show you a small heat source. It's not going to show you an exact temperature. And anybody who's seen any of the demonstrations from 150 feet to 100 feet, you can't see faces or anything like that. Where you're really looking for either landmarks or you're looking for something like a fire or something like that. So privacy related, we're not sharing any of that information or anything like that.
Yeah, because that's always the other concern with drones is the privacy issue. And if you can just update us, in the newspaper article, you talked about how you would use the drones for 19, how you would use them for finding areas where we could put infrastructure or tents or different things?
Yeah, so in coordination with our office in Warren County, we did some pre-planning for COVID-19 that we were tasked with finding areas that we could stage resources, be it medical resources, mortuary services, those type of things. So specifically, we've used those that we received from the DJI disaster response program to do pre-planning. So mapping of locations where we could stage resources, or how we would lay out facilities if we had to open up a temporary hospital or those type of things. Now they could be used for any one of the other uses that we use them for. Like obviously, lately we've responded to a lot of fires or things like that. So they weren't specific for those uses. They were also to be used for other things. But in relation to COVID-19, yes. There was some talk in other municipalities where they're using them for things such as social distancing, monitoring, anything like that. We obviously have not had to use them for anything like that here. Normally, we're socially distant people in our area, so that's not something we've had to. Now, there's discussion. It had a speaker on it. It had a light on it. We had one of those before. The only time we've used a speaker was on a search, other than doing a demo or anything like that, to show people what the capability is. So if you were looking for a lost or missing person, you could call out a message, something like that. We're not using it to yell at people or try any enforcement efforts, anything like that.
And public safety has a drone policy that you follow on usage and.
Yep. So both agencies, public safety and the sheriff's office, both have drone policies, and the county has the overarching drone policy regarding the joint SUAS team.
Good. Any questions for Tim? Thank you for clarifying that.
Hartford has a question. Hello?
Last question, Mr.
Hartford.
Happ?
Yes, for Tim. Tim, I'm glad to say that you are not using these for any kind of enforcement during COVID. These drones came from FEMA for COVID response, and you probably could use them for enforcement. I certainly hope you would not do that for our right to freely assemble. I'm glad to hear that you're not doing that, but it is not a policy. Tomorrow, if you were requested to, you could use these for enforcement, could you?
I guess that's not something that we would do on our own. Certainly we would consult with the sheriff or the county attorney or the district attorney, depending on the type of situation. That's not something we would do in our everyday efforts of something like that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No other questions? Probation? See, Dan Boucher's on there. Anthony? Go ahead, probation.
I did not meet the time frame for submitting an agenda item, but I did submit a couple of pages of how our department's been handling this situation. I thought I'd like to share briefly with you. We're initially started out with a plan of 50% for our department, and on March 18th we went down to bare bones, where it's just me and
Mr. White, you're breaking up. Is he there, Tim?
He's having some connection issues. Can you guys hear me?
Dan? Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I apologize for that. When we went down to our minimum staffing levels, we were instructed by the state we still had to maintain our contact requirements and our public safety requirements. But we knew that we could achieve a lot of that remotely. So what we did was Anthony maintains staffing every day in the office as the director. And any task he believes can be done remotely is done remotely. He minimizes the amount of staff that's here. Usually it's myself or staff groups POs get called on a case-by-case basis. Need, there has been, so we're still performing those functions. Our second offender supervision and contacts are still handled appropriately. We have mandatory residence checks and address verifications for sex offenders, and paperwork we have to file if they change an address while on probation. All of that's being taken care of. We are still processing our court paperwork, our pre-sentence investigations. Anthony made sure that all pre-sentence investigations have been completed. He wanted to make sure those are completed prior to a return because we knew there was going to be an influx with the court paperwork. There'll be new pre-sentence investigations being submitted to our department to be done. And what he wanted to make sure is we had everything taken care of before we returned. So they got those tasks completed. So we're pretty happy that the POs are doing quite a bit of work at home. Just a few things we highlighted in the correspondence that we sent. We left out the fact that we are still making restitution checks available to victims. There's been over $12,000 in restitution checks paid to victims since the shutdown alone. About, I think, $2,000 of that was paid to the Department of Social Services, which is nice for our county.
Thanks to a timely
implementation of credit cards. Juvenile appearance tickets are still being processed. We have had to do some things that we didn't want to. We have had to go out and search a couple of houses because of like guns and things like that that were reported in residences. We're trying to prioritize what needs to be handled and what can wait, what we can do remotely over the phone. We're working with the judges and social service agencies and the police department to prioritize those things to see what can wait and what cannot. Director White put a proposal on the paperwork about return. We're prepared already to return at 50% because we created that plan with the county administrator prior to leaving. So we had the same plan in place prior to the shutdown that we will return with if you decide to go to 50%. However, the directors also created a plan for full return that can happen at any time if you see fit. We would be utilizing our 3 interview rooms as office space to socially distance and make sure people are not in the same offices together. The director would also be assigning people to be working from the field doing home visits or field visits to make sure that certain people are out in the field, certain people are in the office. That will remedy our situation of making sure people aren't all here at the same time. So our department's ready whenever you guys are to tell us to get going either at 50% or back to normal. We are having people coming in and out of the building, which we've talked to the county administrator about. That was in our original proposal. We're limiting that, but some of those functions have to be done. A couple people are coming in today. I think Mike talked about somebody earlier cutting a house arrest bracelet off. We have to file that violation and get a warrant on that case, and that person will be coming in to file the paperwork with the court. But so far, things have worked pretty smoothly that we arranged with the county administrator.
We are
Dan,
also
are you and Anthony
supervising
in-
mission air.
They got, they're sitting next to each other, close to each other, so you're getting.
I think, yeah. Mr. White, you're muted.
Unmute your mic.
Unmute your mic, please.
And if you guys can hear, if you're both,
We're also,
if you're both in the same room, one of you has to turn down your volume because you're getting the feedback with
we're also supervising ignition interlock cases. Those come in electronically to me. Then I'm able to disperse the information out to the supervising probation officer. They can electronically send notification to the courts of any violations of the ignition interlock. We're currently supervising 500 probationers during this time period. We've completed 25 pre-sentence investigations and collected around $12,000 to be dispersed to victims. So we're holding our own here. I am familiar with the case that was brought up previously regarding violation of probation and the cutting of electronic monitoring device. And a violation of probation is in the process for that case. And we'll proceed with any type of court conferencing to address any mental health needs that this person may need.
You think the person who cut the bracelet off, are they a danger to the community or themselves or both?
I would say in this situation, there's more risk to themselves.
Thank you. Any questions for probation? No questions? Thank you, Dan and Anthony.
Thank you, sir.
Any other business? No other business? Do you have a motion for adjournment and lunch?
So moved.
Second.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
It's lunchtime. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
You know, I wanted to talk about the